Welcome to the 6-Month Promise Podcast.
There is a life I lead in this city, hurrying to cut my teeth. I can take what I need to get by. It doesn't make it easy. The other piece of
Hey guys, so for this pilot episode, I thought I'd talk a little bit about myself so you guys can have an idea of who I am. Then, come next episode, we'll get started with the interview format. So my name is Anthony Gonceso. I'm 18 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm a writer. I enjoy cooking. I am obsessed with film. I'm also secretly obsessed with comic books, though I hardly really tell a lot of people that. I love music. I'm very eclectic when it comes to music. There isn't a genre that I don't listen to. I enjoy reading, and as any other 18-year-old, I enjoy gaming, though I try not to do it very often. I'm a Christian. I grew up in a church. My grandfather and his father before him were ministers, so I'm very accustomed to being the grandson of a pastor. Also from Brazilian descent, my grandparents moved to the United States when my parents were just little kids. My mother was 3 and my father was 7. They moved up to New York City and grew up there. My parents started dating, and neither of them had any clue that neither were Brazilian. Until one day my mother was on the phone with my father and she was speaking Portuguese, and my father was like, "You're Brazilian," and she was like, "Oh, you're Brazilian," and that's pretty much how they found out. As years go by, they got married. They had 3 children, an eldest boy named Eric, a girl named Vanessa, and then me, their little angel, though my mother might say otherwise. My father was in the Air Force, and so we were, your typical military brat kids until 9/11 happened. And my father was sent off to do 3 tours, and when he came back from Iraq, he decided that he no longer wanted to live in America, and he wanted to be part of the military. And so he took us to Brazil, where he wanted to expose the Brazilian lifestyle to his 3 kids. My father went on to working on an oil rig, and my mother went on to being a stay-at-home mom. And everything was seemingly great. We lived in an apartment right across from the beach. It was sort of, I would say, a penthouse type of apartment. It was very, very nice. We had nannies and maids. I mean, we were very much your pampered style family. Eventually, we did move to another city in Brazil, and that's when my parents got pregnant again with my little sister Victoria. Everything was great for a while. We got used to having a little kid in the house, and though it took some adjusting, we settled pretty well until my parents got a divorce, which was pretty shocking to my family and to my siblings. It's pretty devastating when the 2 people who you expect to be able to trust the most can't even trust each other. So one thing led to another, and my dad moved out from our house. My parents split up, and we went from having the very cushy lifestyle to having a very tough lifestyle, one that we did not expect at all to have. Days where we didn't know what we were going to be eating, or whether we were going to be able to continue living in the house that we were living in at the moment. But if it wasn't for the support of our friends and for the support of the church, things would have gotten a lot worse. So, after many years of suffering and just scrambling to survive, my mom turned all her focus onto coming back to the United States. And after lots and lots of struggling, we finally made it back thanks to a very, very nice judge who allowed us to come back to the United States. I'll never forget the day that my mom came home and she pretty much looked at me and my siblings and said, "Start packing, we're leaving like in the next couple days." And what I felt like, if I remember correctly, was like 1 or 2 days saying goodbye to people and just packing up. And one night we drove to the airport, said goodbye to a lot of friends and family who we miss dearly, got in the airplane and came to Atlanta. And so we left a extremely hot country that was in the middle of the summer to come to the United States that was in the middle of the winter in Atlanta, which was snowing at the time. And so it was brutal. But I'll never forget landing on the airport, or in the airport, and seeing my grandparents for the first time in years and just running up to them and embracing them. And the drive back to Charlotte was just so cathartic, because I remember thinking, after all this struggle, after all that we've been through, we're finally here in North Carolina, in America. And I honestly had that immigrant feeling of all of our dreams can now come true because we're here. So we moved in with my grandparents. We didn't really have anywhere else to go, so that was kind of a given. Living with my grandparents was loud, to put it into one word. That's the one thing about Brazilian families. They can't all be put in one building for a long period of time because they tend to explode. So after some time, we found our own place. We moved back when I was turning 10, so I went straight into 5th grade. I had a tough time getting used to the American lifestyle, I'd say, but I did luck out with some pretty good friends and some amazing teachers who made the situation a lot easier for me. I mean, they were very understanding and they took their time with me, which is more than I could ever ask for. I won't lie, after elementary school, middle school was no walk in the park, specifically due to the fact that I wasn't the best student in the world. So yeah, it wasn't easy at all, especially all my teachers. I was your typical slacker student, so I wasn't really working hard, rarely. If it wasn't for the fact that I had charisma and I knew how to sway people towards my side, I probably wouldn't have passed. And so I always was able to talk my teachers into helping me, and one way or another I would always pass on to the next grade. I remember actually sitting in class and taking out my pens, my colored pens, and playing Power Rangers with them, and I would look up and if we were on answer of question B, dude, we were on Z by the time I was looking up and I was paying attention. So yeah, I was not a good student at all throughout any of my middle school life. Going into high school, I guess I could say that I changed a little bit because I started paying more attention in class and I became less of a slacker. I wouldn't say that I wasn't a slacker, I just became less of one. So I was going through some classes, doing some effort, and that's when I started realizing that a lot of the people around me had their sort of, I won't say, they had a thing that they would do. Whether that was sports or some hobby or just some extracurricular activity that they were into. I didn't have any of that. I mean, I played soccer and I did a couple of different sports here and there, but it wasn't anything oh my God, yeah, this is my thing. This is what I could totally see myself doing. My thing was I'd come home, play video games, hang out with friends on the weekends, and movies. And that was it. I would watch movies all day long and just chill. I was the most relaxed person you could meet. But one thing led to another, and I started realizing that I wanted to have my own thing. And I wanted to have something that I could say that I was really, really good at and that was better than anybody else. So I'll never forget, one night I was watching the Oscars and they were doing the award for best scriptwriters. And it was the first time I ever saw the format of a script. I think I must have been 13, 14 when I saw that. I was 14. So I was 14 years old, and I saw this script for, I think it was Bridge of Spies or something. But I remember thinking, scripts are really simple looking. I feel once you get the hang of them, it's not really hard to do that. And I've always been a very creative person. I always had an easy time coming up with cool concepts and stuff, because I would play around with my friends and we would play with our imagination, and I would always come up with some kooky, weird idea. So when it came to thinking about these scripts, I was I could possibly even do that. I could write a script. I mean, I watch movies all the time. There's probably not much to it. So I decided to sit down and start writing a script. Well, nothing came to me and I couldn't do anything, and so I kind of gave up on that until a couple weeks later I saw the tribute for James Burrow, the director of Friends, Will and Grace, Cheers, Taxi, and a ton of other shows. And I saw that, his sitcoms, and I I was paying attention to some of the stuff that he did, and I was like, you know what? I could just write a sitcom. Like, I think I could do that. So that's what I did. I sat down and I started writing a sitcom. It was called... God, what was the name of it? I completely blanked on the name of this sitcom. I think it was Switch Up. I think that was the name of the sitcom. It was like about like these like male roommates that like move in with this French guy, and the French guy, I don't know what I was thinking when I was writing this actually. Like the French guy was like he was like into fashion. I don't know. It was a weird show, but like I remember I wrote 3 episodes to this show, and it was just like I was really really into it, and I thought it was the funniest thing in the world. I remember I showed it to like my family, and my mom was, of course, she was like, "Oh, you know, this is really funny. This is really good. Yeah, you could start doing this." And everybody else was supportive. And I showed it to my brother, and he's just like, "This isn't funny. Like I can't picture this at all." And I was like, "Oh, well, you know, okay, it's not for everybody, I guess." But I moved on to writing scripts and dramas, and I started writing film and getting longer scripts and trying to like outdo the last one. And next thing you know, I was falling in love with the idea of becoming a writer for film, and it became to drive me to become a better person. I started paying more attention to the world around me, craving to be more of an intellectual and less of a average teenager, you could say. Then I got the opportunity to go into an internship with a photographer who did cinematography. I met this guy. His name was Juan Osa. He was the brother to a family friend of ours. And he's like, "Listen, man, I hear that you wanted to do film. And, you know, I'm a cinematographer. If you want to learn some stuff, you could come around with me and I'll teach you some stuff." And I was like, that's awesome. So I got to go around with him, and he was completely different from anything that I was kind of used to. He was like your typical 70s type of guy, like, you know, like hippie feel to it, and I loved it. He was always like, you know, don't like give in to like society, you know, they're trying to make you into a certain way. And I just love the like complete essence that he would give out. I was totally into it. And one thing led to another. Because of this free-minded mentality, I remember I went to my mom one day and I spoke to her, you know, with the internship and me starting writing and my grades improving, I was wondering if I could switch over to doing homeschooling. I mean, my sister was already doing it at the time, so I was wondering if I, you know, could jump in along. And that's when I was completely shocked, because my mom actually said yes. So I went on to doing homeschooling and finishing out my last 2 years of high school with homeschooling. But because of that, I got to like just completely immerse myself with being exposed to different ventures, I would say. I got to go into more in-depth sides of film and writing. I got to join writers group. I attempted on making 3 different films. All of them failed because, I don't know, I just never really stuck with it, I guess. I became obsessed at a certain point with business. I started getting really, really into entrepreneurship and started selling things that I'd buy online and started making my own little businesses here and there. One thing led to another. I actually found myself in a network marketing business at the age of like 17. Yeah, I was like just turning 17. And I don't know, I was just wrapped up in like the idea of like, I'm really, really into culinary, so maybe I could do something with that. And then eventually I found myself also auditioning to be part of a acting, like it was like managers, and they took on their like acting classes, I guess. Yeah, I would say acting classes. I signed up with them, but they were also like managers, so they would send you out to find jobs, and you could actually like start an acting career with them. And I made it in, like, I think I forgot how many exactly like were auditioning to be part of like this acting guild or whatever you could say, but I made it into like a very small percentage that also made it in. So like out of like a room of like 20 something people, they only picked like I would even say 5 people maybe, and luckily I was into that 5. but due to some financial issues and different things, I had to get out of that. After getting out of that, I realized that I was getting super in depth into business with this network marketing and starting different businesses that I wanted to do. And so I was getting extremely far away from what I wanted to do, which was writing. So I completely quit all that. And I was like, when I turn 18, the main focus is to just write and enjoy myself and just allow myself to continue experiencing different things, but not go into business the way that I was going into. So starting 18, I was writing a script for a movie called The Waltz on the Floor. The idea was given to me by a close family friend of mine named Joel. He's really, really into culinary, and we kind of bonded quickly when we met over that. And I'll never forget, he was telling me about this time that he went over to this restaurant that I want to say it was a Gordon Ramsay restaurant, but I'm not 100% sure. But he went and he sat down and he was talking about how he would pay attention to these waitresses and the waiters that were like going around and like working the floor, but the way that they were working the floor was almost like a dance. Like they were almost like dancing around the floor because everything was just so seamless, you know, like something would drop on the floor, they'd pick it up without you even really noticing it and replace it. Like they would refill your water and you wouldn't even realize it. It was just so beautifully done. So I remember like listening to that and thinking, you know, there's like a ton of movies about like chefs and different things like that, but like there isn't a lot about like the other sides that go into like a restaurant. So that's what I decided to start working on. And I've been working on that script for 2 years now. It's still an ongoing process, but eventually along the way, I got stuck. And I was, you know, with all these different things that was going on and quitting business and doing all these different things, I said, you know what, let me give a break on just writing this specific script. Let me just clear my mind, think about some other stuff, and then if something comes to me, I'll come back and I'll finish it out. So throughout that period, I started writing a comic. Now, the way that I got into writing this comic book was because I've already been extremely in love with comic books since like the age of like, I don't even know. I think since I started being able to understand what a comic book was, I was in love with a comic book. But, you know, I went into a comic hole again where I was just constantly thinking about comic books and constantly reading comic books. And this was like a couple months ago, actually, I was doing this. But I started wondering why I never actually just sat down and wrote myself a comic book, like with my own ideas and things. So I just decided to do it. You know, I sat down, I thought about, you know, what would it be about? And I remembered a friend and I would play around pretend when we were little. And we came up with this really cool concept of like, oh, what if everybody that we knew had superpowers? So I took that concept and I started writing my own comic book. So hopefully soon you guys will be able to like see about that and hear about that. I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go along with the show. Maybe I'll be able to talk a little bit more about it. But I started working on that. That's what I've been working on recently. Now I'm also trying to enjoy myself, hanging out more with friends. I'm in a relationship now with a girl named Rachel. We've been dating for 7 months now. Surprisingly enough, out of like all the girls that I have dated, which I say that like there's so many, but I feel like there weren't that many. But out of all the girls that I did date, she is the only one that went out of her way to date me. So I felt like if there's anything that I would say on this podcast about her, I would have to stress that. Yeah, I just felt very, very proud at that moment when that happened. But yeah, just enjoying 18. Starting now this podcast. The idea for this podcast, actually, this is a cool story too. When I wanted to do a podcast before, I've thought about doing one before, but I never really sat down and did one. I always thought about doing it with a friend or something like that, but I just never really got around to doing it. But like a couple weeks ago, I was at a friend's house. We were exchanging some like late Christmas gifts, and my best friend's parents, who I've known since like middle school, they they told me, you should start doing a podcast. And I was just kind of like, all right, whatever. I don't really know. Like, I don't know if I'd be into it, or I don't see myself really being able to do that. But like, one thing led to another, and everybody at the table is now telling me, you should do this podcast. You should do this podcast. And like, it was just getting to the point where like I could not leave that table without saying, yeah, I'm going to do this podcast. So I did say, for 6 months, I'll give you the complete and total like dedication. I'll really, really stick to it. Thought out episodes. We're going to plan the whole thing, put it all together, and we'll do it for 6 months straight. After 6 months, I'll decide if I really want to do it or not. But I mean, here we are. Overnight, the idea has kind of really grown on me, and I'm really excited to see what this podcast can be and where we can go from there. I'm excited for next week's episode. The way this podcast is going to work out is that we're going to be talking, as you've already heard, we're going to be talking to different people, whether about, anything, business, culinary, writing, anything that I would be interested in and I would think other people would be interested in, we're going to talk about. And I mean, if you guys who are listening have anything that you guys would like to listen or to have me talk about, I'll put it on the Instagram page. You guys can DM me and just let me know what you guys are thinking. But I'm really looking forward to where we're going to go with the show. I'm really looking forward to the stories we're going to hear, to the people we're going to get to meet, and hopefully you guys enjoy the show also, because I mean that's what it kind of comes down to. Is I'm doing this because of you guys. I'm doing this so that the people who believe in me can be proud of me. I think that's a good way to think of it. I think that's the best way actually to think of it. Is just, there's a lot of people that wanted me to do this, and I want them to be happy with the outcome of it. So I hope you guys are happy too. So I'll leave you guys with this. Actually, I did want to leave you guys with something pretty cool. So I remembered when I was in elementary school, my grandfather, and this was back when we still lived with them, because I started 5th grade actually when we were still living in their house. So I remember my grandfather would drive me to the bus stop, and while we were there, he would, we would be talking, and it would be really early in the morning, so we would be talking in the car. And he would always tell me before going out before I went out to the bus, he would always say, "Go mad." And I didn't really understand what that meant until he explained to me way later on. Go mad, make a difference. M-A-D, mad, make a difference. So I want to leave you with his words, and you know what? Go mad. I think that's what this podcast is going to really be about. It's going out and making a difference into your community, listening to what these people are trying to do in theirs, so you can, in a sense, copy it and make life for yourself a little better. So go out, go mad, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Thanks for listening. I'm Anthony Conceso, and come back next week with another episode of the 6 Month Promise Podcast. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Show you what I wish I knew. My will is strong with a place to lean. In the moment I hung desperately. The other ring on my wrist is